Commonwealth's attorneys and I have concluded that the NCAA sanctions were overreaching and unlawful.
Someone's got to develop a product that you and I, as a consumer, are going to want to buy.
The country needs a comprehensive energy plan.
Hello and welcome to this edition of For the Record. Our guest today is Executive Editor of the Center Daily Times, Chip Minemyer. Chip, welcome to the show. And really, why are you here? Because there's been nothing to talk about in this area for the last month or so.
It's always quiet. I go in the morning, prop my feet up on my desk, take a little nap, listen to the crickets chirp, and wait till the day's over so I can go home.
Well, since you're here, let's talk about Tuesday and primary day, because there were some huge things that happened, historical things that happened. First and foremost, let's talk about the state high referendum. It's something that you guys covered for a year and a half since the talk about it. Were you surprised, A, at the margin of victory? I think that's the first place. Were you shocked by that?
I wasn't shocked that the referendum passed. I thought that, you know, we've been proclaiming the efforts of the school district officials for some time. They've definitely worked hard to get their message out, to connect with the community. So was I surprised that it passed? No. Was I surprised it got 70% of the votes? Absolutely. You look at history, these things generally don't do well. Some of them have lost 90-10, 70-30 the other way. So it's a real feather in the cap of the administrators and the school board members who work so hard. And at the end of the day, we endorsed the plan, and a lot of other people did too, the Chamber of Commerce and some other organizations. So I think I was not surprised that it passed, even though they tend to not do well. The margin was certainly surprising.
The people that came out to vote, two different viewings. In the rest of the county, not a big turnout, but in the state high area, huge turnout.
It was, and I looked at some of the precincts before I came over, and they ranged, you take out the student-heavy borough precincts, but most of the precincts from College Township, even to Harrison, Half Moon, and across Ferguson, ranged from the mid-30s up to 50% in some precincts, which is phenomenal in a primary. You still want to see 100% of the people vote. That's not going to happen, but to get 30, 40, 50, it means that certainly people were pulled out by that issue, and that's what we heard at the polls also, Tuesday morning.
One of the things, we had Amber Concepcion and Scott DeShong on the show prior to this. The way people came together, I think, is what made that so successful, because it wasn't a Republican issue, a Democrat issue. This was a community issue. And some of the people, were you surprised at some of the people that were really working together on it? You mentioned the Chamber of Commerce, you know, but some of the other groups, were you surprised at the way they came together?
No, it was a real grassroots effort, and there were a lot of folks on an individual basis and in community groups and people pushing for it, and certainly the district folks were very, very active and very much available for people to ask them questions, clarify points about cost and all those kinds of things. The Chamber is interesting, because most of the times chambers of commerce are political entities. They will get involved in candidates, endorsing candidates who might be business oriented, tax reduction oriented, things like that. They weighed in on this one because they saw it as an opportunity to enhance the quality of life and the value of properties in the school district, and then also by that, by extension, the overall economy through the addition of a high school. Very interesting.
Now let's talk about political stuff.
Well, that was political.
Well, but I mean,
let's just stay on it for a second, because one of the things we did ask the school district is, how do you run a political campaign, which this legitimately was. It was on the ballot and people were voting.
And they certainly bought advertising.
Without coming across as political. And I think that was the trick. And I think one of the things that helped them was having the organizations we talked about, putting up signs and doing some of those things. But I think they approached it not so much as a vote for us, but as a, here are the issues, here's what the school looks like now, and here's what's going on. So I think from that vantage point, they handled it well. They couldn't spend a lot of money on, political, specialists and people to kind of analyze the race. But you have to look at who might vote, who tends to vote, and they spent a lot of time talking to the people who historically voted. And that was a strategy I think worked out well for them.
Since we're on the topic, who did you send through the school? Because I had always heard issues about the music area flooding at different times. And I'm sure there's probably archive photos of all those things happening within the building.
We took a couple tours of the facilities. And in one case, the one specific time we did a big weekend package, a reporter by the name of Matt Morgan went through and kind of climbed around, and they told him, don't wear office clothing. So he was there in jeans and kind of, work shoes and those kinds of things, clothing that you could live without if you had to at the end of the day. And we had a photographer went along and kind of, visually captured what was going on. So we had people that tried to climb around in there and get a close look at what was being portrayed as a very challenging educational environment.
what is your plan as we go forward now with the project? As it passes, when will they start breaking ground to enhance the infrastructure?
We're talking to them right now about that very thing. I think they have a plan. They had a timeline. They weren't going to reveal it until they actually got through Tuesday. You know, the old jinx yourself.
Of course,
you know,
yes.
Because we also asked them, what if it doesn't pass?
That was one of the
what do you
questions
do
I asked
first?
too, yes.
And we've got some thoughts, but we're not going to talk about that right now. And unfortunately for them, they don't have to.
Sure.
I think you go back to the plans, you really look at your numbers, and you begin that process of setting up a timeline for when do we, start moving kids, obviously to get through the school year.
Right, yes.
And then develop a logistical plan for how do you handle really tearing down most of a building and putting up a new one and really doing a lot of work across the street at the north building and still have the kids going to class starting in late August. That'll be true. They've got to put that plan together, and we'll be asking them about that.
And because they have the infrastructure in place, the communications that they had about what they're going to do are going to have to get more intense now because if you're have a child there, you're going to need to know where your kid's going to need to be, and
That's absolutely right. And I talked to some teachers and administrators who said, well, now the real work starts. Sure. Not just the construction phase, but also the outreach and the communication phase, as you said, so parents know what's going on. If the bus has to stop at a different place than it used to, if it has to come in a different time, if this roadway is closed for a period of time. Obviously, kids need to know if my class is somewhere other than where I expected it to be, or if I'm going to be in a trailer. I have no idea if that's part of their plan, or
sure.
Move a lot of people across to the north building while they redo the south building work. Communication, they've done a great job with communication up to this point. Now it becomes even more important.
What could you see as a downside now that this is passed? Do you think the naysayers come out of the woodwork now as construction begins?
Well, what I hope they do is keep paying attention. That they take the steps to hold the district's feet to the fire, to come in under budget.
Sure.
To do the things they said they were going to do from an academic standpoint, to put together the facility that they promised, and to do it for the money they said they were going to do it for. And I think, look, I hope the people don't go away. I hope they still stay engaged, and they may feel as if Tuesday was not a win for them, and that's fine. But they still need to be a part of the process of making this all work going forward. And I think there's a place for their voices.
Right. That's a good stopping point. We're with Chip Minemyer, the Center Daily Times, back with more For the Record right after this. Welcome back to For the Record. We're going to handicap the primary on Tuesday with Chip Minemyer, the Center Daily Times. Chip.
I can handicap it now. It's over.
Who do you think will win? Were you shocked by the victory margin that Tom Wolf had on the Democratic side?
Shocked is a little strong, because he certainly flooded the airwaves with his advertisements. He got a big jump on everybody else, spent a ton of money, and I think that's the formula we've seen succeed in other races prior to this in the state and across the country.
That's exactly right. If your name is Tom and you're able to self-fund, you can run ads very quickly and win your primary. Tom Smith did it 2 years ago in the Senate side. Now Tom Wolf does it this side. But 58% in a four-way in Center County. He won every county in the state.
It's shocking. He dominated here in Center County, dominated everywhere, and you certainly expect him to do that in certain areas, but to go into Philadelphia and do very well, to go into Harrisburg where, you got some people who were pushing different candidates. You had a candidate on a lieutenant governor race. That was surprising. Certainly pointed to his ability to establish himself as a brand politically early on. He was running against some folks who have some nice political chops.
That's exactly right.
Rob McCord, Katie McGinney.
Rob McCord wins statewide twice, and he got skunked in this primary.
I think a lot of people, and what I'm hearing is people were a little turned off by his attempt to take on Corbett while he was taking on Wolf and taking on the world all at one time while he had a job, which is difficult. And I think that kind of a brusque and rough and tumble campaign didn't play well here. Wolf just kept to his knitting, as they like to say, and at the end of the day, it worked out very, very well. He had more votes than everybody else combined, as you pointed out, and that's remarkable.
Do you think, in the annals of when people look at this race as they prepare for the next race, people let him on the air alone too long?
Well, I think the other candidates are probably now looking at themselves and saying,
if you're looking at how you run your campaign, you can't leave a guy on for 6 weeks all by himself.
Well, and I think you've seen the Corbett campaign pick up and look at, he was campaigning for November. He wasn't campaigning for this past Tuesday. So, you know, he had to look at what these different candidates might bring to the table to oppose him in the fall. Now it's obviously very clear, and he's got an uphill climb, let's admit it. And I think he needs to continue what he's doing now in terms of, you're talking about the governor,
right,
being in front of people. He's coming to Center County on Memorial Day, we found out. He's going to be a lot of places.
Not as a candidate, though.
Okay,
right,
sure. And if you're in office and you're running,
it's the power of incumbency, of course, but it is an official visit. It's not a political visit.
It's appropriate for him to be here, be that as it may. He is running for re-election, and he's going to be a lot of places throughout the summer. He'll be at every chicken dinner in Pennsylvania because that's a number he has to catch now. His own lieutenant governor got more votes than he did in the primary.
That's a historic mark, by the way. It's never happened in this county before that the lieutenant governor got more votes. Now, granted, Bob Guzzardi did do a write-in campaign, and it was heavily pushed by some people who are anti-Corbett, at least for the primary. Exactly right. And that has to make Republicans nervous, not just nervous, scared about the response he's going to get in central Pennsylvania.
Well, and as you know, there was a lot of rumbling in the party about whether or not to even support Corbett for re-election, to maybe find somebody else that could go out there, beat him in a primary, and then have a better chance in November. The ultimate decision was to not necessarily pursue that course, but I think they do have an uphill climb, the party and Corbett as a candidate, to not just shave off this lead that Mr. Wolf already has established, but also to convince people that he's the right guy to stay in that office for 4 more years, regardless of who's on the other side of the ticket.
Chip, when have you known, you've been covering news since the 80s. When have you remembered a governor not paying attention to Center County this long ever?
Well, he's been invisible, and we've asked that. I know Rob Gleason from my days in Johnstown. He's the state chairman. I've said, when is the governor going to be in our area? And the response was, well, we're trying to get him up there. It still hasn't happened. Now he's coming Monday finally. He's not coming in to sit down with us necessarily, or sit down with you, or sit down with the media in the region and talk about who he is. I think that probably is down the road now. He's going to make a lot of appearances here between now and the fall. This is a very losable county for him. And you know, you take the Penn State angle and bring that into the mix. I think there's a lot of people who look at him and attach his name to the entire Sandusky scandal that's played out here, and his role in it, whatever that might have been.
That's exactly right.
And you know, the other side of it is maybe he writes off Center County and spends his time somewhere else. I don't know that, but he's going to be here Monday. Well,
one of the things, because the governor's race is at the top of the ticket, and there aren't a lot of other options for people to vote on. There's a contested congressional race. Congressman Thompson has an opponent, but it's the governor and it's the congressman. If you go down the ticket from there, Senator Corman's does not have an opponent. Neither do any of the sitting representatives. We're waiting to see what happens with Representative Fleck, if he does or does not, however that's going to pan out. But there's 2 races here, and it's very easy for people to go in and go, well, you know what, I'm going to vote for Tom Wolf. Well, if I'm going to vote for Tom Wolf, why don't I just go straight ticket D? How does that impact the congressional race?
It would be a surprising outcome if Glenn Thompson didn't win in the fall. And a lot of things can happen between now and November. And certainly I know, you know, that's a race. He's going to fight it. You know, we've got Karis Strano-Taylor, who's an attorney, and you know, I don't know what kind of money or war chest she might have, but it would take something like that for that to happen, I think, for him to lose. On the other side of it, though, you're right, and because Democrats oftentimes cross over and vote for the Republican candidates. If Corbett doesn't draw any of them over, it could make for an interesting race. Or if, even more importantly, if Republicans just say, I'm not going to vote. I have no reason to go out there. Corbett's dead in the water. I'm not going to bother voting. Or I don't like him.
Right, the Mitt Romney factor, you know, where 3 million less Republicans voted for Mitt Romney versus John McCain. That could spell real issues, because this is the biggest county within the 5th Congressional. That could really have an effect.
And it's an interesting county when you look at it politically. And I know I've spent a lot of time in analyzing it and talking to Congressman Thompson about it. You've got kind of the State College Penn State core, which is heavily Democratic because of the presence of the university. Obviously, you get outside, you get into a more Republican region, and the rest of the district is very heavily Republican. It's very rural as you move up across the north toward Erie. He can win a race without winning State College. He knows that. He doesn't want to do that, but I know he can do it by the numbers.
It's never good if you're from the county and you lose your home county.
Yes, I wouldn't want to be there, but the real objective is to get back to Washington, and I know that's also what he's thinking about strategically.
Whoever his opponent is, they're going to have to outwork this man, because the man proven in 2008 that he can outwork anybody in any race that he runs for.
He'll be around. I mean, he's going to be at the same events at Memorial Day, but I know he'll be in the county a lot. He obviously has a home here, but he'll be back for for events, and you'll see him across the district. And I think the only way that and this is my only caveat, the only way that race goes the other way is if, as we said, the Democrats come out in mass and the Republicans stay home and just kind of say, I have no reason to go out and vote.
It's a good stopping point for us. Back with more For the Record right after this. Welcome back to For the Record. Chip Minemyer is a guest, the executive editor of the Senate Daily Times. Chip, along with all the fun things about Election Day, we have a federal judge who overturns the marriage defense law in Pennsylvania, and it is now legal for same-sex couples to be wed in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We're now the 19th state. What kind of things do you think that presents to the world now?
Oh, it was interesting to watch, the reaction in some areas. The Center County began to make licenses available the following day. And you're right, it came out on Election Day for us, so it became as big a story as that was. We had a referendum at State College, and we had a governor's race, and we had a Rockview sex abuse trial that ended the same day.
Exactly right.
And a lot of things that were going on, and so we got pushed inside. I mean, a lot of days it's the biggest story. And we haven't got a sense of the full reaction. I think this is a town, this is a region that I think people will be generally accepting of that. Some areas will be a lot less so. You've had the mayor of State College be very visible on this issue, and some other people. So I think, I don't think people here are stunned and shocked. I think it's, it's kind of the time.
Sure. Well, I think one of the things that I think people are upset about is not that it is now acceptable or the law in Pennsylvania. It's the fact that here's another situation where a judge overturned something that was passed by the legislature and signed by a governor. I think that's where the frustration is arising in people, that why do we bother with having legislators when judges just sort of legislate from the bench?
Tells you the power of the judicial arm of our government, that they can step in at that moment and say, look, it's not just happening in Pennsylvania, it's happening in a lot of places.
That's exactly right.
It's all over. And step in and tell the people that the folks you elected made this decision, but we see things differently. It's very fascinating.
Wouldn't it be fun for you as a journalist to be able to interview a judge, because they have that wall of protection? Doesn't that infuriate you at times?
It does. It's a different level, certainly. I mean, I'm not even comfortable with the fact that we vote and elect judges, although it's probably better still than the political appointments.
Sure.
Either way is a little dicey, but you'd like to kind of pick their brains and ask them about this ruling or that ruling and what came down and why. And it's a very political office, as we know, and controversial, certainly all the way up to the Supreme Court, but they are protected by that layer that keeps them from having to answer to us, unlike the senators and even the governor that has to go before the cameras and the reporters and answer questions.
Because it's never a slow day. There's always another gift that keeps on giving for the Penn State situation and the outpouring of that. Really? Well, I've been following it sort of on the internet as the hourly updates happen. We have two different things take place where the Paterno family has another hearing on their lawsuit, and then Judge Free files for a halt with the President Spanier defamation case. Where do you go in those two, and are we ever going to have a sit down in a courtroom with a jury or a verdict that anything's going to happen to any of this stuff?
Are we ever?
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, that's a really interesting question, because I know back in late 2012 when a lot of the things were happening, and Graham Spanier was added to the criminal charges list along with the other two gentlemen. We thought, well, maybe by early 14 we'll see that in a courtroom. We didn't think it would be quick with all the posturing and cross filings. Well, here we are, late May 14, and we're not anywhere close to it.
Right.
The fascinating thing for me is that there are these lawsuits going on simultaneously that are moving faster than the criminal proceedings that are indirectly tied to them. And meanwhile, the NCAA sanctions that this is all about are moving along, and in a couple years will be over.
Right.
And who knows if any of these cases will have been exhausted by then.
When you became the executive editor of the Senate Daily Times, did you ever think you would be on your fourth coach at Penn State for the football team?
Well, yeah, actually, Bill O'Brien was hired right before I came back here. So, although I had spent a lot of time here with Coach Paterno's era, who would have seen that? And I think, well, Bill O'Brien was always somebody who was looking at the NFL and was very, very open about that and very clear I didn't think it would be 2 years and gone, but I think that was where he saw himself ultimately. And here we are. You have Larry Johnson fill in for a short period of time,
Right.
and then all of a sudden it's James Franklin. And the irony is, we talked about how the story keeps on giving. You bring a coach from Vanderbilt where they have a rape case, and he was, now he's been tied back to that. You bring a president to Penn State from Florida State where they had a very visible, high public interest case with Jameis Winston, the quarterback at Florida State, wins the Heisman. The team wins the national championship. He's the president there.
And now he's a self-server at a grocery store.
Well,
allegedly.
He probably is.
Okay,
I've met him.
allegedly.
I think he probably could just take care of his own
Okay.
business in the store if he needed to.
We talked about the new president. You mentioned him, Eric Barron. What do you see what his role needs to be now as we come out of the ash heap that was the Sandusky issue? Where do you see him, from what you've talked about, where he's taking Penn State University?
Well, he certainly, we sat down with him last week, which was very fortunate for us, his fourth day on the job. He came into our office and sat down, and we asked him that very question. And the priorities he has established that he's attacking early on include, he's looking at cost and how does that affect students. Any of us who have gone to school recently or have children who go to school, we know how big a deal that is.
Right.
And it's a state school. People are supposed to be able to afford to go there. Right now, a lot of people can't. And that's got to be a high priority. He calls himself a student-focused president, which means he's all about maximizing the experience for students, making sure. He likes to tell the story about, if you have a sports car, you wouldn't drive at 20 miles an hour. And he wants people to have the full experience. I'm not sure he's suggesting people go out and drive 100 miles an hour. But his point, I guess, would be, if you're coming to Penn State as a student, get the most out of it that you can. And he says his mission is to help students find ways to do that, which certainly you can applaud that. In terms of some of the scandal fallout that's been going on, I think he's still trying to get a handle on what his role is in that dialogue going forward. What to say, what to not say. What piece of it can I address? What should I leave for the attorneys and all those kinds of people? He's only been on a job 2 weeks.
Real quick, let's talk about the new Board of Trustees, people that were voted in. Senator Jubileer among the group. What do you see those three people bringing, the new three that came in?
It's a fascinating group. I mean, look, this election involved multiple groups endorsing candidates. It involved a lot of independent candidates that had great resumes, ties to Penn State, ties to the region, ties to the state. But at the end of the day, it wasn't close. The PS4 dominated.
Right. Real quick, website and Twitter, if you would.
CenterDaily.com is the website. It's always active, and we're always updating it. So stop back frequently, and it's CenterDaily.com, all one word, on Twitter to follow what our reporters are doing.
Thanks for being here, Chip. Thank you for watching For the Record. We'll see you again soon.